City Council. They allowed us the ability to introduce a hotel tax, so the growing popularity of our city among international visitors can help contribute to keeping Toronto great. They have increased their investments in childcare spaces and subsidies, which, when partnered with the city's new childcare framework, will help better address a very real concern of many Toronto parents. They've committed to allowing us to introduce and administer a vacant homes tax if we deem that is necessary and effective to help keep our housing market accessible to people of all ages and income levels. And they've committed to providing some surplus provincial land in Toronto to facilitate the development of purpose-built, affordable rental housing. I thank them for these measures on behalf of the people of the City of Toronto. But I must say that the most crucial needs of the people of the City of Toronto were not met by this budget. Premier Kathleen Wynne and her government had a chance to stand up for Toronto on transit and on housing. Instead, at least on the pages of this budget, they turned their backs. Le budget de l'Ontario ne répond pas aux besoins urgents des résidents de Toronto pour un transport en commun plus long et un soutien pour le logement public. Les investissements passés ne répondent pas aux besoins futurs dans une ville à croissance rapide. We need a provincial partner who is focused on building our city's future and not measuring its achievements in dollars already spent. You can't play a highlights reel from last year and expect people to believe that you're going to be on the ice for the next game. And we can't fall into the same trap we've been in for decades, convincing ourselves that the hard work is all done, that all of the past and even current projects will suffice, that we don't have to plan and fund for the future, Earlier this year, after the province refused to allow the City of Toronto to raise funds for its own transit and infrastructure priorities, I made it clear that I would expect from a strong, committed provincial partner their strong commitments for these future projects. I expected them to come to the table and at the very least commit to matching the historic investments being made by the federal government in new transit expansion projects across the country. I don't think the public thought that as they saw the federal government starting to invest again in transit and housing, that at that very same moment, the provincial government would say its work is done in terms of future new investment in transit and housing. Let's be clear. Without matching dollars from the province, the relief line cannot be built. And as I have said repeatedly, that means no Yonge Street North extension. Waterfront transit will not be built. The Eglinton East LRT cannot be built. I also expected the Ontario government to speak clearly and with conviction about the needs of Toronto's social housing residents, thousands of our most vulnerable citizens. Yes, the Government of Ontario has taken steps to cool our housing market, to make things more affordable for those who can afford to buy. But the province also owes something to those who rely on social housing for a roof over their heads, a roof that past provincial governments built, failed to maintain, and then handed off to cities, especially Toronto. A lack of provincial partnership will be the single biggest contributor in present circumstances to pressure that will come and is there already to close Toronto community housing units. And it doesn't have to be that way. That's the sad part. Last year, when we convened a housing summit to call attention to the mounting crisis in social housing across the country, person after person said to me how lucky we were to have the stars aligning, to have three levels of government who all at the same time cared about these residents and our social housing and were committed to take action together. And so yesterday's Ontario budget was a missed opportunity to show the people of Toronto that our vulnerable residents matter too. The budget could have stated that together, all three governments would join forces to fund the renewal of this housing. After yesterday's budget, we are still only at 2 out of 3. The Ontario government gave no clear indication it has any intention to invest in social housing, to invest new money in social housing. In Toronto, our priorities are clear and they are urgent and they cannot wait until the Ontario budget of 2018. And so now I will be turning my attention to ensuring that the national housing strategy being delivered by the federal government later this year includes 3 committed partners, committed to restoring and protecting Toronto's vital social housing. I'll be working with federal ministers and MPs and with my fellow mayors across the country to ensure that federal transit and housing funding programs have an expectation of required matching dollars from our provincial partners. Cities cannot be expected, and were not intended, to carry the financial burden of future transit expansion or housing renewal on property tax revenues alone, especially after being denied the chance to raise our own funds in the case of transit. And a provincial role in these projects should not be seen as a burden or in conflict with their past investments, but as an obvious commitment to the bright economic and social future of Ontario's largest city, the economic engine of Ontario and the source of billions in revenues of all kinds for the Government of Ontario. I will also be making sure that Toronto's expectations for our residents are clear to all provincial members of Parliament representing Toronto and all provincial parties and their leaders going into the next provincial election. I believe Premier Kathleen Wynne understands that common sense and social justice require Ontario to step up on housing for our most needy cities and our most needy people. I believe she also knows that making up for decades of inaction on transit means continuous investments for the future. She knows this city. She cares about the people of Toronto. I'm now going to be strongly encouraging her Toronto MPPs to convince her to act now to build on the new federal money that is available to us. And I will be encouraging their political competitors to hold them to account in the interests of a stronger, fairer Toronto. Your questions.